I'm going to be doing a Magic the Gathering Deck Tech video, and this is my newly constructed deck. It's a cross between Simic and Gruul, the Gatecraft clans. I thought it would work well just because the big creatures from Gruul trigger the evolve from Simic. Right, the first card that I'm going to be using is Skybender Staff. I've got two of them. They basically make any flying creatures unblockable, so it's pretty useful. It also gives them a slight boost on their attack power. Next is Burst of Strength, which I'm also using two of. Basically, I can put a 1/1 counter on a creature and untap it. I just thought it'd be pretty good. It's one drop as well, so it's not exactly expensive. Giant Growth is good for a flying card or anything. Target creature gets +3/+3. One drop, pretty good for attacking creatures. Force Adaptation is very good, as at the beginning of your upkeep, the enchanted creature gets a +1/+1 counter on it, so if it's a long game, that creature is going to be getting a lot of 1/1 counters on it. Cloudwing Raptor, which I'm using two of, is a flying creature with evolve, 1 mana for a 0/1. The 0/1 may seem like quite a bad stat, but then when you think if you're getting it right at the start, near enough everything's going to evolve it and buff it pretty quickly. Next, I've got two Mugging cards. Mugging is a sorcery card, which deals 2 damage to target creature and that creature can't block. For 1 mana, seeing as you're doing 2 damage to a creature and also, well, basically stopping it from blocking, it's a very good card. Also, I'm using Bioshift, which lets me move 1/1 counters off creature to another creature. Just if I've got a lot of creatures on a normal creature, I can move them onto a flyer and gives me an easier attack. And then I'm using Kindled Fury, which basically gives a small boost to attack and gives a creature first strike for a turn. So that was pretty good. Next, I'll move on to the 2-drops. I'm using one's Ginbrand Goblin, which is just a 2/1 for 2 mana, but I can Blood Rush it, which is the Gruul ability, which is quite good. Also, I'm using the artifact Ring of Calonia, which equipped creature has trample. Also, at the upkeep, if it's a green creature that's equipped to, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it. I'll also be using the Simic Guild Mage, and it's a 2 mana for a 2/2. But what's important to abilities? If I activate its ability, any creature that I put into the battlefield gets an additional 1/1 counter on it, so just a bit of a buff. And I can also remove a 1/1 counter from a creature you control and then draw a card with the other ability. Well, I'm also using one of my favourite cards, which is Tower Defense. Creatures I control get +0/+5 and gain reach till the end of turn. For 2 mana, you can stop a lot of flyers, which is very important for my deck, seeing as I'm lacking some flying creatures. I'm using one Alpha Authority, which enchants a creature and gives it hexproof and can't be blocked by more than one creature, which is good for the Gruul's big creatures. Stops them from being murdered or Grizzly Spectfield, which is a bitch. I'm also I put in one Gruul Charm, mainly as I can deal 3 damage to each creature with flying, so that's pretty good. I'm using Ghost Form. It's 2 mana, and up to 2 creatures are unblockable this turn, so if I'm using 2 big 7/7s, make them unblockable, that's 14 damage right to the person, which is brilliant. Also using one Pit Fight. Target creature you control fights another target creature. It's pretty good. And then I'm using 2 Shamble Sharks, which are really good Simic cards. They're flash, so you can cast them at the same time as you could play an instant for 2 mana. It's a 2/1 with evolve. Also using 2 Titanic Growths, and if I play that, it's an instant. Target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. Use it on a flyer or any other kind of creature, really buffs it. One of the cards I'm using is Burning Tree and Missionary. It's a 2 mana creature. It's a 2/2, but when it enters the battlefield, you get to add 1 mountain and 1 forest to your mana pool, which basically means you're getting this out for free near enough, so it's a very good card to get out. And then lastly I'm using the Wildwood Rebirth. Basically 2 mana to return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. Move on to the 3-drop one. Right, I'm using 4 Ember Beasts. Thank you. These are 3 mana creatures for a 3/4. The only drawback is they can't be they can't attack or block alone. But seeing as I've got 4 of them, makes them quite useful. To subsidise for my lack of creatures, I'm using a Croca Unra or anything. It's got Reach, a 1/3 with Evolve for 3 mana, so helps stop flyers. I've got 1 Slaughterhorn, basically a 3/2 that you can Blood Rush, fairly good. Also got the Simic, one of the Simic mages in there. It's a 1/2 for 3 mana with Evolve. And you can move a 1/1 creature from itself to onto another creature, so okay ability. Right, next I've got Miming Sling. It's a sorcery card, and I get to put XX green ooze creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is the greatest power among the creatures I control. Basically, if I've got a big strong Gruul card, like a 7/7, I could then basically copy it and put a 7/7 green ooze creature token onto it. It's useful. And now I've also got a Nimbus Swimmer, which is costs 2 mana plus X mana. It's a flying, and how much extra mana you've paid for it gets that many 1/1 counters on it. So it's okay. And I've also got the Simic Rune, just gives you a bit of mana. Also you can turn it into a creature with hexproof. And I've got the Drakewind Caraxi, which has flying and trample, and it's a 3/1, so it can do some quite serious damage. Right, I've got a few 4-drops. I've got a Clinging Aminos, just as a defender with Evolve. It can be quite useful just to have a defender where you know it's going to do its job. Also I've got a Crown Keratok, which is a 4/3 with trample. Also any other creatures I control that have 1/1 counters on it gain trample, so it's a pretty good card. And then I've got 3 Ivy Lane Denizens, and they are 4 mana for a 2/3, but whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on a target creature, so they can just buff up creatures that get brought in. I'll move on to the 5-drops. I don't have many. I've got 2 Xur Wines, which are 5/4s that you can Blood Rush, so pretty good. And also I've got a Leyline Phantom, which I think is a really good card for Simic, as it's a 5/5, but when it does combat damage to a player, when it deals combat damage, it returns to your hand, but then when you bring it back out again, it triggers all the evolves again, so you can keep bouncing that around and keep buffing up your creatures. And lastly, I've got 6-drops. I've only got 3. I've got the Reptile Predator, which is it's a 6/5 that can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, so it can smash with people's defences. And I've got a Sapphire Drake, which is a 4/4 flyer, and each creature I control with a 1/1 counter on it has flying. So you play that along with the one that gets everything trample, you've got flyers and everything with a 1/1 counter has got flying and trample, which is good. And then lastly I've just got a Ruination Worm, which is just 7/6, just plain and simple, which is quite good just as an attacker or a blocker. I've got 90 odd cards in this deck, so it's a pretty big deck, and so it's pretty big, so it means I have to have a lot of mana in it. So I focus mainly on forests, I've got about 15 forests, and then I've got 10 mountains and 10 islands. And in case I have any mana problems, where I haven't got any islands or I haven't got any forests or for whatever reason, I've got a few Evolving Wilds, where it's a land that I could sacrifice to get a certain type of land that I want out. I've played a couple of games with this deck and it seems to have done pretty well so far. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I think it's pretty good. And that's the end of my deck.